أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه. My dear friends, in this video I'm going to show you the methodology or the method I employ with which to increase my understanding of the holy text of the Quran. And I'm going to use an example of the previous video that I've done for you, the video that looks at the traits that cause people to become enslaved in their lives. And those traits I mentioned to you that those traits, you can deduce them by reading the verses of the Quran. And I explained to you that the concept or the word insan, man in the sense of man in his feebleness, is how I understand the word insan to appear in the Holy Quran. So in other words, wherever the word insan is used, it is used in a slightly derogatory form, in a form where man is regarded as frail, as short-sighted, etc. So what I've done is, I've done the results in the previous video. So I've shown you that man, the Quran accuses man or regards man as being fallible because of three traits, and that is his short-sightedness, his gullibility, and also his fickleness. So those three traits are the three traits that I've deduced. And where have I found those three traits? What I said to you was that I read the verses on insan, and from those verses I came to that conclusion. I'm going to show you the process now. All right, let me first show you what I regard as a proper and recognized system of content analysis, which I've applied to the Holy Quran. And this is a system that is a recognized system in research, in understanding texts. And I believe I'm one of the first people, or maybe I'm the first person that is applying this technology, which I'm not the inventor of, to the Quran, so that I'm able to deduce from the holy text, so that I'm able to draw more meaning from the holy text. So the technology itself is not invented by me, it's invented by a writer called Kali. And I just want to summarize to you how what we mean by content analysis. Based on the work of Kali, 93, a book titled Coding Choices for Textual Analysis, a comparison of content analysis and map analysis, sociological methodology, from that book. And according to Kali, a content analysis is an identification and analysis of ideas or concepts contained in the text. Right. A concept is contained within a phrase or a word. Kali indicates that coding may follow predefined theoretical categories or an interactive concept choice, which she describes as developing a list of concepts incrementally during the process of coding. And what we mean by that then, what Kali means, is that content analysis and the process of content and textual analysis is a process where we extract from the text certain concepts. And these concepts we do by studying the text. And there's a detailed methodology which I'm not going to go into here now, but it all amounts to arriving at a word or a phrase. And what I've done is I've drawn out three words for you in our last discussion. I've drawn out the word fickleness, the word short-sightedness, and the word gullibility. Those are the three words. Now, let me go back one step. Now, how did I get to those words? How did I get to the point of identifying those words? Right, what I did was I first gathered a pool of data. Now, what is my data? What is the data that I have pooled and which I've worked from? The data I've pooled or worked from is simply the term insan, right? So I've looked at the term insan as it appears in the Quran and used that term then to look at all the ways in which that term is pictured or described in the Quran. Now let me just go with you quickly through a quick synopsis of the word insan in the Quran. From Analyze Quran, which is an app you can all get, it's easy, it's free to download. Anyone can get this app. We can have a look at the word insan. And as you can see here, there are how many cases of insan? Let's see quickly. We have insan, qul law antum amiluna tamlikuna. Let me just, difficult to see on the screen. Right. Anyway, ins 71 times. Insan 71 times. So that was my original pool. I worked on 71 verses. But not all of these verses are expressing a particular trait. So some of them would just explain the origin of man. Some of them would simply refer to man as being a ungrateful or treacherous or whatever. I went through the 71 cases, and the amount of cases that clearly expressed a particular attribute was more like 20 cases, right? So I took those 20 cases and recorded those 20 cases. Okay, so once I got the 20 verses, I packaged them within an attribute or a trait that was common to all of them. So for example, let me take the example of fickle. Right, so there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 verses that refers to man as being fickle. And let me give you an example of what we mean by fickle. I'll take an example out quickly. We give man a taste of mercy from ourselves and then withdraw it from him. Behold, he is in despair and falls into blasphemy. If we give a man a taste of mercy from ourselves and then withdraw it from him, behold, he is in despair. Do you see where I get to the idea that man is fickle? Because if you look at that, if you have to do the content analysis and you have to describe in one word, what does this verse allude to? What trait does it refer to? In other words, what this verse is saying, you give somebody something, and when there's nothing forthcoming, then they turn on you. They become completely dismissive of you. Do you get the point of what I mean by I draw the sense, the interpretation I draw is fickleness? Let me look at another one. Look at this one. This is another verse in that folder. And he giveth you all of all that you ask for, but if you count the favors of Allah, never will you be able to number them. Verily, man is given up to injustice and ingratitude. Again, I group it with this common grouping, which I title fickle. And so there are approximately about 8 verses that I could draw the meaning fickle from. Now, the word gullible would be about 4 verses. Let me look at those quickly. And here's a verse that says, Ya ayyuhal insanu ma gharraka bi rabbikal karim. Now, gharraka means to be seduced. And the question is asked in the final and 30th chapter, where God will ask man, what is it that seduced you so much on this earth? And so the idea that comes out of this and similar verses that refer to this concept is gullibility. Man is prone to falling, you know, for whatever suggestions anyone comes forward with. And then, of course, short-sightedness would also be a number, okay, 2 verses only. And man was created very impatient, and by being impatient, it means not really willing to wait, not really willing to sabr or to endure much, but wanting results quickly and promptly. And so the idea of short-sightedness came from verses such as this one. Then there was a 4th one which I never built in, and that was stubbornness. So I didn't, because I could only find one verse which spoke about stubbornness. He has created man from a drop. The verse doesn't say sperm drop. This translation is weak there. And behold, this same man becomes an open disputer. So in this verse, which is chapter 16, verse 4, man, insan, is regarded as somewhat of a argumentative creature, somebody that is stubborn, unwilling to concede his position. And, you know, if I could have had 4 elements in that video, I would have mentioned stubborn also. However, I felt there was only one verse, and so I just prioritized it to fickleness, gullibility, short-sightedness, but we can in fact add stubbornness also in, because there might be more verses not using the word insan, you know, other verses that refer to man as quite a stubborn creature that is unwilling to compromise. So as you can see there, is the process of content analysis is looking at the verse, extracting a concept, in this case the trait associated with the idea of insan, and then grouping them, and then overall forming a position on what does Allah or God think about insan, or what is the position expressed for insan, for man, in his gullible form, in his frail form, in his in his feeble form. And those 4 items that I've mentioned, or 3 items, fickleness, gullibility, short-sightedness, and stubbornness, are the ones that come out from those verses that I've raised. And that, my dear brothers and sisters, is how I arrive at an understanding of the verses, using the content analysis, scanning the Qur'an for the verses, and then arriving at a meaning. And so again, I remind you, the Qur'an speaks about insan and lists 3, but actually 4 traits that make man prone to becoming weak and enslaved by other men. That is his fickleness, gullibility, short-sightedness, and his stubbornness. By the way, you know, there's a process that we call redefinition or redescription. The technical term is abduction, and no, not the abduction that refers to kidnapping. In terms of redescription, we are able to then take that trait and regeneralize it on man. So if Allah describes man as being fickle, you know, willing to relinquish his loyalty at any given moment, at the first sign of adversity or hardship, he becomes weak of faith. That fickleness that God describes man as, that fickleness I can redescribe, because it is in the Quran referred to God's fickleness to God. We can actually reapply that as fickleness to all good things, fickleness to all good beliefs, fickleness to all good friends and supporters and family, etc. And so when I did that video, I basically did a redescription, a process of abduction, of reapplying the trait to more than just the field or the context where the Quran applies the trait. So I've taken fickleness and made a broader application of that weakness within insan. And I think that gives you an idea of how I come to a video such as the previous video that I've made. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.